complimentary wine tasting, and then we do the Wills and Trust workshop. So those start at 6 p.m. You can RSVP on our website, like I said, or email or call us. All right, so I like to start with a little bit of background. So before I was Shane Young, I was young Shane. So my husband thought that was funny the last time I said that. So I was actually born in New York, and my family moved here when I was 9 for my dad's job. So my dad was in the airline business, and he had his business degree from NYU. So he's a very smart, savvy businessman. After a couple of years of working for another company, another airline here in Las Vegas, he decided to open his own airline. And he left his job. He was the breadwinner for our family. Left his job, got financing, got investors, was able to purchase airplanes. He hired an attorney to handle all the corporate matters. And unfortunately, that attorney ended up taking advantage of him. Through the help of some other third parties, they pushed my dad out of the company, out of control of the business that he started, and they ended up running it into bankruptcy. So as you can imagine, that was devastating, growing up and having our family put all of our eggs in this basket, thinking that this was going to be the way that, was going to sustain us for, indefinitely. And what happened was my dad hired a second attorney who was better than the first to file a malpractice lawsuit against the attorney that had defrauded him. And they filed a malpractice case while I was in middle school. And I remember hearing my dad talk about his experiences with these two attorneys. And even though the second one, like I said, was better, I recall my dad saying how he never really felt represented or counseled in the way that he would have wanted to be counseled. And things were very transactional. And he never felt like he was being heard. So that lawsuit ended up lasting until I was a sophomore in college, actually, and my dad ended up losing the case. So as you can imagine, after putting everything into this business, everything into this lawsuit, thinking that he would get justice and nothing come of it, it was hard. So going through that experience and growing up and seeing that was something that was very difficult for me, but eye-opening, and it changed my perspective and the approach that I took, towards life. I actually met my husband in high school, so I like to share a couple of those pictures. I went to high school here. I went to Green Valley High School, so I'm not too far from here. I graduated in 1997 as a valedictorian. So I was one of those kids, like I had to get straight A's, and education was one of the values that my family instilled in me, because they said, like, look, once you're educated, and not necessarily just school-wise, but just informed, right, you can make much better decisions for yourself, now until the end. So I graduated from high school. I went to Pepperdine for undergrad, and I graduated in 3 years with my bachelor's in business administration, which was perfect timing because I was 5 months pregnant with twins at the time. Yes, so that was not part of our plan. I had planned to start law school right after graduation in 2000, the fall of 2000, but that's when they were born. So we came back home to Las Vegas, where both of our families are, and I stayed home with the girls for a year, and I started law school on their first birthday. So they are 18 now. And then I share a couple of pictures. So this was our prom when we were 18, and then this was my 40th birthday in December. And I just think it's funny that we were actually posed the same way, and it wasn't intentional. But when I saw that and I was looking at them, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to include that in this presentation. And also my oldest daughters that I mentioned that are now 18, they went to prom this past Saturday. So now it's like solidified in our minds that we're no longer in high school. It's hard, it's a hard thing to come to grips with. So as I mentioned, mentioned, I went to law school. I started law school on their first birthday, and I graduated in 2004, so this is my graduation picture. I went into private practice with a big firm, so I was fortunate to get the job that everybody wanted, and I enjoyed it. I liked the atmosphere. It was very intellectual. I learned so much from the attorneys that I was working with and being mentored by, but I didn't like how the traditional law firm was set up. So even though I had a great experience and I learned a lot, there was often a disconnect that I felt with my ability to serve clients the way that I wanted to. So I'll talk a little bit more how traditionally things are done versus how I approach things. But this middle picture was when I was at my second firm, Ballard Spar, and this is the managing partner at the time, and I was pregnant with another one of our daughters, and he was cracking jokes like, okay, I'm ready in case she goes into labor. So I did work up until the day that I went into labor, which, you know, he thought that was funny. After I left the big firm, I went and I was the general counsel for a financial services company, and I was there for 2.5 years until I started my firm, Young Law Group, in 2017. So the first thing that I like to start with as far as estate planning side is really to get the information to you so that you understand what estate planning is. And when you have the information, then you're able to convey that much better to the people, you know, in your lives, your clients, and things like that. So many times people think of estate planning, or when they think of estate planning, they think of a will, or even life insurance, or some benefit that you may get from your employer. And while those things can be components of your estate plan, it's much more comprehensive than that. So you want to think about estate planning as a plan that addresses every type of contingency. So from you becoming disabled, you're incapacitated, you can't make healthcare decisions for yourself or financial decisions for yourself. What happens in those situations? Who's able to step in and help you? Who can step in and take care of your kids if you have minor children? How do your assets get passed to your beneficiaries, to your heirs? And what does that process look like? So that really, all of those things are encompassed in estate planning. So for those of you that have a plan, I want you to think about when was the last time that you reviewed your plan. Most times people who do have planning in place, which actually is the minority of people, most people don't, have their estate plan and then they get it done and then they think that they don't have to do anything with it anymore. They don't review it, they don't update it, they never hear from the attorney again. And that's not how you should look at estate planning. It's something that really is dynamic. It should change because the law changes and your life changes. So you want to make sure that you're taking a look at that regularly. For those of you that don't have a plan, which I'm guessing the majority, because usually it's 70–75% of people don't have planning in place, I'll go over what the state's plan is in that situation. So planning for death is typically how estate planning is approached. And I experienced this as a first-year attorney when I was at Snell & Wilmer. I had a pro bono client who came in, so I was representing her, I was volunteering my time. Her name was Ada, and her father had passed away, and her family was in probate court, so they were fighting. And she said, I don't understand, why we're in court. He told me that he had an estate plan, that everything was taken care of. And he actually had an estate plan. He had years ago met with an attorney. The attorney prepared a trust, but the attorney never told him how the trust worked, the critical importance of funding the trust, which I'll talk about. Some of you may know what that means, but I'll go into some detail about what that actually is. So he didn't know that he was responsible for transferring his assets into his trust, and that's what keeps your assets out of probate court. So it's not enough to just have a trust set up. You actually have this piece of transferring or funding the trust that's required, because any assets that are sitting outside of your trust are not named or titled properly have to go through the probate process if they're valued at over $100,000. So he had not titled his assets properly. His assets were also not tracked throughout his lifetime. So when he died, there were a couple of accounts that actually went to the state's unclaimed property department because his family didn't know about it. So he had an old 401k and then another deposit account that he had on like with a phone company that was just sitting in the state's unclaimed property department, which is very common. People just don't know. And I bet that, you know, at least some of us sitting in this room probably have assets that are sitting in the state's unclaimed property department. So one of the things that I recommend you do is go online. You can Google the state's unclaimed property department or any state that you've lived in to find out and do a search under your name or your family's name to see if there are assets that are currently being held. So of course, because his planning wasn't done properly, he didn't avoid probate. So his family still ended up in court, which is exactly why he did the planning in the first place, but he didn't understand that there were holes in his plan. So another thing that happens when you go through the probate process is your assets get passed to your heirs unprotected. I'll talk more about that later. And as you can see with Ada's father, there was no ongoing legal guidance, which is very typical in the traditional estate planning model, where you go, you meet with an attorney, you sign your documents, you take your binder, you put it on your shelf at home, and then you never do anything else. You never hear from the attorney, there's no ongoing relationship. And that really is to your detriment because it's something, like I said, that is dynamic. And we talked about how assets can get lost to the state's unclaimed property department. So the best way to look at estate planning is planning for life. So many times people don't want to think about death, but I've found in my experience and the clients that I have helped through this process is they get a true sense of peace once they know that things are going to be handled correctly according to their wishes and that there aren't any gaps in coverage, right? So the way that I approach things is empowering you to make informed, educated decisions. So that's why I do things like this, where I do lunch and learns, or I do events, or I'm giving this information out, and I feel like that's my duty as an attorney to provide you with the information, and then what you do with it, you know, once you have it, you know, it's on you, right? The next steps that you want to take. So going through the process, and we were talking about this earlier, right, where people are like, oh, well, I don't have enough money to do an estate plan. Well, it will actually cost your family and your clients' families a lot more money in the long run if you don't do estate planning ahead of time versus making the investment now to get it done. So we make sure, of course, that your assets are not lost upon your death. So we track assets from the time that you work with us in a family wealth inventory. So part of the process that I do is a family wealth planning session. It's a 2-hour meeting with me. Before you even come in and meet with me, you do some homework. You fill out a family profile, and it includes information about you, your family, the assets that you have, what you want to make sure is taken care of. I ask you to start thinking about decisions that you want made as far as health care, you know, your beneficiaries, your executors or successor trustees and things like that. So I take the information, once you decide to do planning, I take the information as far as your assets, and then I create what's called a family wealth inventory that tracks all of the assets so that nothing gets lost to the state, so that everything is in one place. So if if something happens to you next year or in 10 years, that information is there and your family's not scrambling trying to find where your assets are. And we also use that to make sure that we see how your assets are titled currently and how they need to be retitled or redesignated if they're a beneficiary designated asset. Another thing that I offer clients is a way to protect your assets from outsiders or other parties that can make claims. So we'll talk about what that asset protection looks like in a moment. And of course, my approach is different in that I believe that when you do your planning with me, that's the beginning of the relationship. It's not the end. So when you take your binder home, that's actually where our relationship really starts, because from that point on, I'm going to be keeping in touch with you. For all clients that do planning with me, we offer every 3 years a complimentary review. So you come in and we can review your plan to see like what has changed in the law or your life, and we can make updates at that time. So at a minimum, I recommend reviewing planning every 3 years. For clients that decide to join our client membership program, there's an annual fee of $250 a year, and one of the benefits is an annual meeting with me where we look at your plan, see what's changed, because a lot can change in a year, right? The law changes, your life changes. And then if there are updates that need to be made, they are either complimentary or they're discounted at 50% off. Plus, there are a bunch of other benefits, like your financial powers of attorney. We refresh and prepare new powers of attorney every 3 years because those are documents that go stale, and most people don't realize that. They think that, oh, well, I've got a power of attorney and like it's going to last forever, and they are documents that actually become ineffective after a few years. So those are things that you want to make sure are updated. So we do that for clients that are members. And then if you have parents that are here and need their planning done, we do theirs at 50% off. We keep track of your family wealth inventory forever so that whenever you get assets or you dispose of assets, we're making sure that that stays up to date. And then another benefit that I'll share with you is you have access to Smart Vault, which is an online secure vault where all of your estate planning documents are stored in folders, so you can access it 24/7, and you can add documents to it, and then that's a way for us to continue to work together as well. And of course, we keep your family out of court and out of conflict because we cover all of the holes in our comprehensive plans that oftentimes are left open. So your plan will actually work when your family needs it to work. So this is the state's estate plan for those that don't have planning in place or they have flawed or incomplete planning. And it's a court process, so it's called guardianship in the event that you are incapacitated or disabled or ill, or you can't make healthcare decisions or financial decisions for yourself, and you need a legal guardian appointed if you haven't done that for yourself properly in advance. So it's called guardianship in that instance, and then probate in the event of your death. So when you talk about probate, when you talk about this court process, most people don't realize that there's really no benefit to you and your family, this court process, because it's a lawsuit that your estate files against itself for the benefit of third parties, for the benefit of creditors. And other fees that come out of this process are attorney's fees. So unlike the planning, the work that I do, everything is flat fee. These attorneys, when they're appointed, charge by the hour, right? So, and they have no allegiance or loyalty to you. So do you think they're going to try to keep their billing down? No, it gets very expensive. Plus there are executors' fees, appraisers' fees, filing and other court fees. Creditors are able to come and make claims because there's a notice period and notice requirements that are subject to this process. So, and bond premiums. So what happens is creditors, because it's a public process, they get notice and they can come and make claims. And really anyone can make claims at that point. And that's what most times people don't realize is this court process, as far as guardianship and probate, is public. It's not private. So anyone can go online and see what's been filed, what assets you have in your estate, who's going to be getting your assets, and when. So that's oftentimes a way that people can prey on, those that are receiving an inheritance, right? So I like to share the story of Aretha Franklin, and most of you know that she passed away last summer, and she had no planning in place. So she had attorneys, that drafted her contracts and negotiated her business deals, but she had no estate plan. And I think that one of the reasons goes to the lack of information a lot of times with respect to estate planning, or a misconception of what estate planning is. And how typically it's focused on death. And with respect to an artist, singers, writers, artists that do art and things like that, they want to think of themselves as leaving a legacy way beyond this life, right? And I think that the way that estate planning is done traditionally doesn't allow for that. So that is one of the things that I do differently is I want you to focus on really being able to leave a legacy. So it's not just your financial wealth that we're talking about, it's the other things like your family values, your stories, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But so she died, and as of right now, her family is in probate court, going through that process. They're fighting. People are making claims to her estate. So she's going to have to pay, or not she, but her estate, her family, will have to pay all of those fees that we saw on that last slide. Attorney's fees, court fees, appraisers' fees, all of those costs are going to come out of her estate, which is valued at over $80 million. So and not only is she going to be taxed with the court costs and fees, but also estate taxes. So because her estate is valued at over the exemption amount, which is currently $11.4 million, anything over that exemption amount is going to be taxed on estate taxes at a rate of 40%. So that exemption amount and the rate actually change depending on who's in office. So when President Obama was in office, the exemption amount was about half of that. And when Trump came in, he highered it, and the rate is on the low side of 40%. So, you know, I'm sure that if had she known all of this, she would have taken steps, bless you, to make sure that this didn't happen for her family, right? Because she worked hard. You know, who wants to lose half of your estate, you know, to the government or to outsiders making claims against your assets? I'd like to share with you more about having just a will. So this is the will of Jackie Kennedy Onassis, and the reason why I'm able to share it with you is because it's public. So remember how I said if your family has to go through the probate system, anyone can pull that information. And many times people think that having a will keeps you out of the court process, and that's not right. Having a will and not a comprehensive plan actually signs your family up for the probate process, which is something that most people want to avoid, right? Another person that died around the same time that Aretha Franklin passed away was the Pawn Stars' father. I don't know if you remember hearing about that. Well, it was in the news at the time, and the reason why the media got a hold of this story was he died, he didn't have a comprehensive plan, he had a will, which was filed with the court, became a public record, and the media pulled the records, saw that he disinherited one of his sons, and blasted it all over the news. So if you want to make sure that you have your affairs kept privately, you want to avoid this probate process, and you want to have more than just a will. Another thing that happens if your family has to go through the court process, known as probate, is your beneficiaries will receive the assets outright. And what that means is they will receive the money that was in your bank accounts right into their own names, into their bank accounts. And for my daughters, I'm sharing this example because they're 18, and if we didn't have proper planning in place, they would receive our $100 million. Just kidding, I don't have that much yet. But they would receive all of our assets into their own names. So think back to when you were 18. Yeah. And what types of decisions would you make if you had received an inheritance at such a young age? You know, would you be smart about the money? Would you spend it on things that you probably shouldn't? Right? Would you take vacations that you probably shouldn't be taking, spending money buying extravagant things? So that is one of the downsides of probate is it goes outright to your beneficiaries, and in my case it would go outright to my kids at age 18, which is something that I would never want happening, right? I mean, they're good girls, but no. Yeah. No. So, or you have the option with the planning that I do and I offer to clients is to provide asset protection for your beneficiaries. So that's how I set up our planning with respect to my girls. So I actually have, in addition to the twins that you see pictured, I've got 5 daughters, and they're pictured here in the bottom right. Yeah, 5 girls. Wow. So one of the things that I did with respect to our planning is when they receive our assets at a certain age, so we've customized, according to what we want, when we want them to have it and how, they'll receive the assets in a lifetime asset protection trust, their own share. So it'll be split equally. They each get a fifth in their own private trust that's sheltered, so that if they get married and they get divorced, that their husband can never claim half, so it always stays their separate property. If they were sued for whatever reason, no one could ever come after those assets. If they filed bankruptcy, that doesn't become part of the bankruptcy estate. So it's a way to really protect the assets that we're working so hard right now for when they get passed to them, to make sure that they get the true benefits of all of our hard work and they don't get lost or taken away by some other third party. And the cool thing about the Lifetime Asset Protection Trust, so typically it was reserved for the very wealthy. So that's how wealthy people have passed down their assets, and they're able to create wealth, and then it's a great wealth generation tool to where they continue to build. So we do offer that to all clients, regardless of how wealthy you are. You have the option to be able to add this into your planning for a really low cost. So traditionally, typically, an asset protection trust like this costs, to do a standalone trust, is $10,000 to $12,000. so it can be, expensive, but you can set it up for your beneficiaries for $1,000 as part of your plan. So, of course, I did that for my kids because I'm drafting the plans, but it would be a good investment. For me, that's a benefit. So another thing that I like to talk about that we were actually talking about earlier before we started was how people that have minor children are often left unprotected. The kids are left unprotected. So just having a will actually leaves your kids at risk. So do we have anyone here that has minor children? So children under 18? Okay. So this is something, well, we all know somebody that has minor children, right? So share this information with them. I'll share two quick stories, actually, before I tell you about the Kids Protection Plan. But what I realized years ago was Charles and I, this is my husband Charles, with our 5 girls. And years ago, when they were much younger, we were on a date. And they were home with his mom, actually. So the thought crossed my mind, what if we didn't make it home tonight? Like, what would really happen to our kids? And I'm an attorney, so I did have some planning in place, but I realized that this particular area, was left wide open, where we were at risk. And what I realized was if we didn't make it home that night, that the authorities, the cops, would show up to our house. They would see that his mom was there with them. She didn't have legal authority to be with them, so they would take our 5 daughters out of the home into Child Protective Services, into CPS, until it could be figured out by a judge who should be taking care of our kids. And that was scary to me, right? Because think about the most traumatic day of their lives. Something happening to mom and dad, and they're being taken out of the home into the care of strangers. And then in my case, we actually do have family that's here in Las Vegas, so we're blessed to have family that's close by. But there are family members that I would never want caring for my kids, right? Never. But they would step forward, and I know that they would. Mm-hmm. They would step forward and they would say, I'm the grandparent, I'm the aunt, I'm the uncle, whatever their relationship is, and claim rights to take care of our kids. And they could be motivated by a lot of things that I wouldn't ever approve of. I would never sanction that. So when I realized this, I thought, oh my gosh, we've got to do better. So that's why we have a kids protection plan for all families that have minor children. We offer that to clients. Another quick story that I'll share with respect to kids is the Barber family, which was a family that was on vacation on a road trip. Mom and dad died. They had 3 young sons that were in the back seat. They survived. The cops came. They took the kids into custody. And then finally one of the family members came. It was an aunt that said that she was supposed to be taking care of the boys. She was actually motivated by the life insurance money that mom and dad had left behind for the kids. And she actually kept the kids away from the other family members and isolated them. Well, another aunt came forward, and these 2 aunts ended up going to court for guardianship over these boys. It lasted over a year and over $100,000 in attorney's fees that came out of the money that was supposed to be left for these kids, right? So those are things that we don't think about, by our lack of action or our inaction can actually result in these terrible, horrific situations that we want to make sure we avoid. So I do have information on our kids protection plan for those of you that are interested in more information or sharing this with people that you know. I will give it to you. We have it. And it goes into detail on how we do short-term planning, long-term planning, ID cards for mom and dad, just in case anything were to happen, instructions to caregivers and guardians that you're naming. So we take care of everything with respect to this plan. So make sure you get that information if that's something that is of interest to you. So we talked about assets, kids, the probate process. Another thing that I want to focus on is healthcare. So many of you might recognize the lady pictured here. Her name's Terry Schiavo, and this was a very, very famous right-to-die case from about 20 years ago now. And what happened was she was in a vegetative state. She wasn't able to do anything for herself. And the only thing that was keeping her alive was a feeding tube. So she couldn't talk, she couldn't communicate, she couldn't feed herself. She was just laying in a hospital bed. And the doctor said, she's basically going to live the rest of her life this way. She's not going to be able to make any type of recovery. So her husband decided to remove the feeding tube, and he was actually appointed. She had a healthcare directive, and he was her healthcare agent, but her healthcare directive was not comprehensive. And so it was a form-based document that an attorney had prepared, and it didn't address this situation. So what happened was when he made that decision, even though he was the healthcare legally authorized agent, her parents stepped in, objected, took him to court, and said, no, that's not what she would have wanted, and that was not included in her healthcare directive. So that ensued a lawsuit that lasted several years. It went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. President Bush at the time got involved, and ultimately, after 7 years, finally, the husband was granted the ability to make that final decision based on what he knew his wife would have wanted to be able to do that. So, as you can imagine, I'm sure that that's something that she wouldn't have wanted in that case, you know, for her family to be fighting and in conflict. But that's what happens when we don't have proper planning in place. So we want to make sure when we talk about healthcare that we're really being comprehensive and turning your wishes into directives that will be honored if anything happens to you. So I'll talk real briefly about what happens if you use or utilize one of the common planning techniques that people try to use to avoid estate planning. So sometimes you can have assets where you can designate a beneficiary, like life insurance, retirement accounts. You can designate a beneficiary. However, if you're married, for example, like we were, and you designate your spouse, and then your kids are the contingent beneficiaries, if something happens to you and your spouse, and your kids are the beneficiaries that step into the role of receiving the assets, if they're under 18, they still have to go through probate. We talked about how signing a will is not enough. And then another thing that I'll talk to you guys about is owning property jointly. So this specific to your industry, to your business, I'm sure that you see this a lot, right? Where you've got a husband and a wife, or even a single person that takes property. Well, in this case, we're talking about jointly, right? So people can take property jointly. Both are on the title. If it's a husband and wife, most times, depending on how title is set up, you can avoid probate on the first death so that the survivor can receive the assets. However, you're still at risk for taxes and capital gains taxes, things like that. And potentially, depending on the way the titling is set up, you may have to probate half of the property. So you want to be careful about taking title, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Another example of owning property jointly I'll share with you is a friend of mine had a grandmother who didn't have a lot of assets. She didn't actually have a house or real property, but she had a bank account. And she decided that was basically her main asset, the money in this bank account. So she decided to name my friend on this bank account so that when she died, the money would just go to my friend, and that was her beneficiary, right? She didn't need anything else. So she didn't even think about the healthcare piece, right? She's just thinking about assets. So what ended up happening was she did that. My friend was married, got a divorce, and guess what her husband did?
Took half.
Right. Yeah, while grandma was still alive. So, of course, this is not something that, you know, you would want to happen, right? But because her granddaughter was an owner on this asset, when she divorced, her husband was able to claim part of those assets.
Because it's joint and
It's
not
joint.
payable on death.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So for you know, dealing with property, right, real property, it's important for you to realize, I'm sure that the houses that you're selling, in most cases, they're valued at over $100,000, right? So when your clients are buying real property, they're opting into this court process, the probate process, if they don't have planning set up. And even though they may owe a mortgage, it doesn't matter. You could have a $500,000 house, a $500,000 mortgage, but it's the value of the property that determines whether you go through the probate process. So whether it's real estate or your bank accounts or whatever other assets, if they're valued at over $100,000 in total, so it's everything, if they're valued at over $100,000, you're opting into that probate process. So you want to make sure that if they're wanting to avoid that, that you've got proper planning in place and things are titled the right way, right? I would also like to mention homesteads. So this is another thing that I'm sure comes up in your line of work. This is an opportunity to also protect your real property up to $550,000. There are some exemptions, but this is something that, if you've got clients that are interested or need more information, you can have them reach out to me. I'm happy to guide them through. But homesteads are another way that potentially, you can protect your real property from claims of others up to a certain limit. So we were talking about title, and this is a question that I'm sure many of you get, and your clients may be asking you, and you're not in a position to provide that information, right? Because you can't give legal guidance. So this is an opportunity where you can direct them to me and say, okay, I can't advise you on this, but I have a relationship with an estate planning attorney that can guide you through the process and guide you through the options. If you want, I also have a digital article on titling, so the different ways that people can take title in Nevada, which are commonly joint tenancy, community property with rights of survivorship, and tenants in common. Of course, you can also take title in a trust, and that's really the way that you can avoid the probate process, is by setting up a trust-based plan where your assets, including your property, are titled and held within the trust. So these other options that I named don't keep you out of court. They don't keep you out of conflict, and you'll be subject to estate taxes and capital gains taxes on that. So the way to protect that is to make sure that it's titled in the best, maximized way. So property is also at risk if the owner gets sued, right? Or creditors make claims. So these ways of taking title do not protect us. They don't protect your clients. And so I mentioned the article, and you'll see on the sheet, if you want me to send you the article, it's under
the next step.
Yeah, your next step. And you can mark off multiple boxes, just so you guys know you're not limited to one. So as we're talking about all these things, if you want to make sure that your family stays out of court, if you've got minor children that you need to protect, if you need your plan reviewed, whatever your situation, just make sure that you're identifying that on the worksheet. So, like I said, the only way to avoid court is having a fully funded trust with disability provisions. So this is the type of planning that I make available to clients, where we're making sure that everything is held properly within the trust and nothing is sitting outside of your trust. So think of your trust, or think of a trust, as a treasure chest. And you want everything that you own to be inside of that chest, because anything that's not in that chest can go or will have to go through the probate process. So we want to make sure with investment accounts that we're retitling ownership properly, that we're doing the same thing with bank accounts, and also real property. So with respect to the real property, we take care of that for clients because we want to make sure that's usually one of the bigger assets that people hold. We want to make sure that's done properly, and we've seen time and time again with other law firms here, their offices are not doing it properly, especially with respect to married couples. There's actually a two-step process that we take to make sure that you will never get hit with capital gains taxes or estate taxes. So we take care of that for clients to make sure that that's properly transferred. And then we're also transferring stocks, bonds, those types of assets. Personal property is things like in your home that aren't necessarily titled, but they're your furniture, your jewelry, your artwork, your collectibles. All of that are assets, personal property assets that are held in your home or in your possession, and we want to make sure that those also get placed in your trust as well. So we prepare a legal document, an assignment that's part of your plan to make sure that those assets get funded to your trust as well. And then on beneficiary designated accounts like life insurance and retirement accounts, we want to make sure that the trust is properly designated either as a primary or a contingent, depending on what the situation is. For example, on life insurance, we typically have the trust as the primary beneficiary so that the money flows into the trust and gets distributed according to your wishes. And with retirement accounts, if you're married, we name your spouse first because there are tax benefits to that, and then the trust as the contingent or backup beneficiary. So just making sure, it depends, it depends on your situation, but we want to make sure that those are properly designated. And then for those people that have businesses, we want to remember your business is an asset that's very valuable. So do we have any business owners here? Right, so you're all running your own business, right? Your realtors, your real estate business. So when we talk about being a business owner, you want to make sure that you have the proper foundation, right? So you start with the legal foundation. Do you have the proper entity or legal structure? Many times people will start a business and they'll form an LLC. They may do it on their own. They may file with the Secretary of State, and they don't realize that that alone doesn't provide you with liability coverage, limited liability, because if you're not taking the other steps that are required by statute and required by the law, you're actually exposing yourself to potential disaster where someone that is making a claim against your business can actually do something called piercing the corporate veil and go through your business to your personal assets. So anything that you own can be at risk. So that's why having a proper legal structure and proper foundation is super important. In addition to legal structure, we review insurance, financial, and tax to make sure that you're set up, you're protected from liability, but you're also in a position to grow your business and maximize, tax benefits so that you're not paying taxes that you shouldn't, and that you have proper coverage also on the insurance side. Another thing that business owners oftentimes overlook is an exit plan. So what happens, when you want to sell your business or you want to transition out, what happens to the business and everything that you've grown? And then also, what happens if something happens to you? Does your business die with you? What type of succession plan do you have in place? How are the assets that you've accumulated through your business going to be passed to, or do you want them to be passed to your beneficiaries and heirs? Most times people say yes, right? But you need to make sure that that's included in your planning. So we talked about protecting the assets that are passed to your beneficiaries, right? And I mentioned the Lifetime Asset Protection Trust. So that's what this slide is about. And it's really the #1 form of airtight asset protection for your loved ones that are going to be receiving your assets. And we also talked about estate taxes. So right now, most of us in this room would not be subject to estate tax if something happened to us today, but that can change, right? So it depends, like I said, who's in office, and the exemption amount has been as low as $650,000 in recent years. So many times, if you've got a life insurance policy or a house or something like that that's valued at over that, you could be subject to estate tax. And the range is typically between 40 and 55%. So do you really want to leave your estate open to, going half to the government? Probably not, right? So this is something that I advise clients to keep on their radar, and we do have planning that's able to accommodate, avoiding this altogether as well. And we talked about losing assets to the state's unclaimed property department. So in Nevada alone, we have over $650 million of assets that are just sitting there, unclaimed. And most people don't know about the assets that they have that are sitting there, right? Otherwise they wouldn't be there, right? So the way that they commonly get there is someone dies and their family doesn't know about assets that they held, and then they just go and sit there indefinitely. So we want to make sure that we're protecting against that, and the way that we do that is with the family wealth inventory and the ongoing relationship, right, that we talked about. The last thing that I'll go over is the intangible piece, right? So this is a picture of my youngest daughter, Samara, who's 7, and my niece, Kieran. And the one thing that I think about is if something happened to me, tomorrow, she would have very few memories of me, growing up. She's only 7, right? And in the case of all of my daughters, from 7 to 18, I would miss their high school graduations, I'd miss their college graduations, I'd miss their wedding days, I'd miss their first babies, all of these things that hopefully I'm here for, right? We all want to be here to enjoy all of these milestones with our family members, whether they're children, nieces, nephews, whatever, siblings. But if something happened tomorrow, the things that I would have wanted to share through those experiences with them would be lost, right? So one of the things that I include as part of the planning that I do that's unique is legacy planning, where I give clients the opportunity to share your stories, share your experiences, share your traditions and family values, so that your family members that or loved ones that are left after you're no longer here have something from you that's intentional, where you took the time, and it really shows your love, right, and the thought that you put into it. So we talked about traditional planning and how one-size-fits-all planning leaves all of us at risk. So, documents are form-based. They don't keep your family out of court or out of conflict. Your kids are at risk of being in the care of strangers or someone you wouldn't want, even family members. And it only addresses financial assets and not what matters most to many of us, which is the family values and other intangible things. So I mentioned the family wealth planning session, and that's how our process starts as far as planning, estate planning with clients. The process allows you to get more financially organized than you ever have been before. So we started with the family profile. So once you book your appointment, we do ask that you confirm your appointment with a credit card, because I'm blocking off 2 hours of my calendar to meet with you. So we don't charge the card as long as you don't no-show. So please show up, or at least give me a heads up that you need to reschedule. But once you book your appointment, you'll actually get some homework to do. And you'll fill out the family profile that I mentioned earlier, which is information about your family, your assets, your family values, things like that. Whatever you want to make sure is taken care of. To the extent that you can be comprehensive in filling that out, it's to your benefit, because the more information that I have when you come in, the better I'm able to counsel you and guide you. So when we're talking about assets, sometimes people get hung up on that and they're like, oh, well, I have to go pull all these statements and put the exact figures and account numbers. And no, you don't need to do all of that. Just make sure that you're identifying the assets, what they are, and the approximate value, so that we can then get that additional information and verification once we're putting together the family wealth inventory. So the homework itself, really, it shouldn't take more than 30 minutes, maybe an hour. So it's not something that you need to spend days on, but it's something that helps us get prepared for your family wealth planning session. So when you come in, I go over specifically your situation. So we go over the homework together. I address whatever concerns or questions that you have. And then based on what you have shared with me, I do an analysis of what happens based on the planning that you have. So whether that is an estate plan that you have, or for most people, it's nothing. So we go over what the estate's process looks like, how much it will cost, all of those things. And then once you confirm what you want to make sure is taken care of, I'll make recommendations on how we can put planning in place that's customized to meet your needs and your family's needs. So typically we've got 3 levels of planning. They range in fee from $1,500 to $8,000. So these are comprehensive plans, and on the higher end, there's more asset protection. They're more involved. So you really decide where you fall. Depending on what you want taken care of is where you fall, and you pick your fee. So that's what we do at the family wealth planning session. I'll make recommendations. I'll show you the different levels of plans, what's included in each one, and then you pick your fee based on the plan that you want. So everything is flat fee. The fee that you see is the fee that you pay. There's never any additional fees where I charge you by the hour, or if you call me the next week or email me and you have questions, all of that is included in that flat fee. So there aren't any additional charges or fees, like I said, unless you decide to join the membership program, which is just the annual flat fee. So when you do planning and you go through this process, you'll know with certainty that things are going to be covered and things are going to be handled. There won't be any holes that are left open. So with respect to your business, this is where you can take what you've learned today to communicate with the people that you're working with, right? So, I put together just a little example of a script, but you're buying property, right? You're talking to your client. You're buying property, which means that you're really volunteering your family for probate court if you don't have proper planning in place. I'm not an attorney, but I have a relationship with an attorney that can help you through this process where you can protect not only your assets, but your family and your wishes, and make sure that things are taken care of the way that you want them to, according to your terms and your intentions. So because of my relationship with Shane, the attorney, she will waive the $750 fee for the family wealth planning session. So the session that I talked about, the 2-hour session, normally the fee is $750. If someone calls and says, hey, I wanna come in and talk to you about my estate planning, if they don't do the homework and they don't have a relationship, they would pay that fee, right? But for the clients that you're referring, you can let them know she won't charge you the $750. You'll actually get that as a complimentary benefit of my relationship with her. And the only planning, or the only fee that you'll pay is for the planning that you do, right? So when they come in for the family wealth planning session, they pick their fee, they pick the plan, and that's what they would pay. So we waive the $750. Also, we're always looking for an opportunity to connect with our existing client base, right? Because that's another opportunity to be able to generate revenue for you, right? Someone that's already worked with you, someone that knows how you operate, how you run your business. And this is an opportunity for you to reach back out to those existing clients. So now you have a reason, right? You can call them and say, do you still own the home? If so, do you have an estate plan in place? Do you have a trust? I think you should talk to my attorney. She can help you and, help guide you through this process. And then, you can ask them, are you looking to buy or sell? Do you know anyone that's looking to buy or sell? Because I'd love to be able to be a resource for you, in that. Those are things that you guys can say. So now you actually have a reason to reach out to these people and be able to generate some additional business and also add value to these relationships that you have. So I'll show you on the screen here are these cards. So if you are interested in giving your clients these, whether they're prospects or existing clients, let us know. I have a box of these cards, and it's a $1,000 value. So what they're getting is the complimentary family wealth planning session, which is valued at $750, plus $250 off any plan that they do because they're coming through you, right? So they would need to have this card and bring it into the family wealth planning session when they come. But this is just another cool benefit that you guys can give to these people that you're working with, whether they're prospects, new clients, existing clients, and a way for you to reconnect or even connect further with them. So for you guys, because you are here today, I will offer 2 gifts to you, which one is the complimentary family wealth planning session. So you will get one of these certificates for the complimentary family wealth planning session, the $750 value. Or if you want to proceed with your own planning and you book your appointment today for a family wealth planning session, which I know already one person asked me about that already. So once you do that, we will give you a certificate for $250 off any plan that you do. So the same benefit that I'm offering you to offer your clients, I'm offering for you guys as well. So those are the 2 gifts. So the next steps are just making sure that you fill out the worksheet that you have in front of you. If you want to book your session today, what you'll want to do is just fill out the information on the back of the sheet and then give it to Nicole and she can schedule you. Okay, and that way you'll be able to receive the benefit of the complimentary family wealth planning session and the discount. So the reason why I'm offering the discount to you if you book the appointment today is because I know that you're probably sitting here, hopefully you learned something, right? Has everyone learned something?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, right? People that probably didn't expect to learn something, like we're all benefiting, right? And you're sitting here after hearing me talk about the realities of what happens, if we don't have proper planning in place. And you probably do have the desire to do something, for yourself, for your family. And I am giving you this gift to encourage you to take that next step. And that's why I do the discount of the $250, because I know that once you book your appointment, you won't get stuck in procrastination. You won't leave here today feeling like, oh yeah, I really should do something. And then you get caught up in your day-to-day and life gets in the way and you think that you have more time. And in my experience, If you don't book your session today and you don't proceed now and take that next step, it doesn't happen, right? It doesn't happen, and then something happens, and then your family's left in a bad situation. So I do encourage you to take advantage. These are the dates that we have available. So you'll see that there are Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and a Tuesday this month with these times. Typically, I only schedule family wealth planning sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I'm opening up a few days for you guys because I know that your schedules are busy and you're here today. So if any of these days work for you, make sure that you fill that out on the worksheet when you're booking your appointment. Talk to Nicole. If none of them work, let her know and she'll see what else is available, and you'll be able to schedule that way. Any questions? I think that's the last slide. Yep, that's the last slide. So I will stick around for a few moments. I know that it's a little after 1 now, so if you want to schedule, talk to Nicole. If you want the cards also, with the $1,000 gifts, let me know. I will give you some of those. And then just make sure you're also identifying the things on the worksheet that you need. And if you want to schedule, and really, if you've checked any of the boxes in the second area where it says, tell us about your needs, I do strongly encourage you to book a family wealth planning session because I think that you will really benefit from it. I mean, you've sat here, you've gotten this information, so obviously it's important to you, and I hope that you'll be able to take the next steps to be able to protect yourselves and your family, and also serve your clients in the best way possible. All right, any questions? No? Okay, you're great. Thank you. Thank you, and we also have these cards, if you guys want more of these to be able to give to your clients as well, let us know and we'll give you these in addition to the other stuff that we have.
And also the other card, the little card?
Yes. Yeah.
I missed that.
Yeah. These ones?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thomas is here to meet you too. He's from Signature for Saturday.
Oh, good. Hi,
So he
Thomas.
just wanted to say- They're in the same building.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
cool.
just came down and said hi.
Nice to meet you. I'll come by
Yeah.
in
Finish
a
up what
second.
you're doing, we'll
Yeah. Who, I know
do.
you wanted one of the kids protection plan brochures. Okay.
Pretty much just all of us.
Right? Yeah. Everyone should take one.
somebody with kids.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Pleasure. I know you have.
Two kids.
Yeah. There you go. I also have some other materials with the common mistakes that people make when naming guardians. If you guys want to take a look at that or take one of those, I think I have them in here.
So Shane, another thing to add for your presentation when you're talking about the kids and where they're going to go. So
How long did it go?
Still
An hour?
Perfect, because we needed at least an hour for what we want to do with it.
Okay, awesome.
I was the only one who ever successful for families, so when it's together,
Right.
the foster care.
They would be
your kids would
separated.
split.
That's one of the things, yeah, they just have to figure it out. Scary. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I say we like to stand on the one.
Okay. Sure.
Everything you got.
Okay,
pretty much.
well, what I'll do, I'll pass this around and you guys take as many as you want. And then I think I have the other, Vicki, do you know where these ones are? You have one? Okay.
Cause I'll put these out of my phone.
Yeah. Those, and then if you know anyone, like I said, that would benefit from this information, remember we've got the webinar and then the other upcoming events, so please, share that information with anyone that you think, would be interested in. I'm not, but if you have family members or friends or anyone else that's outside of Nevada, let me know. I can give you a referral for someone that, is within the organization that I'm part of that practices a similar way. So things are set up, the same way that I practice. Yeah. So let me know, shoot me an email, and I can, just let me know, I just need to know the city that they're in, or the cities that are closest, and then, I can get you some names. Another piece that we have that, you don't have on the table is, and you might wanna share this with people that you're working with, or friends, family. But this, it talks about, like, do you own a home? Do you have kids? Like, these are things that you should be thinking about. So if you want any of these, I've got them, what I'll do, pass them around, I'll pass the folder around, and then you guys can take whatever you want, and then I'll collect whatever's left.
So Shin, for ones like this,
Mm-hmm.
this is gonna be definitely a regular question.
Okay.
Do you have any of these where, because like Title does this course where you can co-brand, so you have your information and
Yep.
yours?
We can do that, yeah. And that's a way for us to be able to really have a collaborative relationship. We can co-brand any of the materials that we have, together, so that it has your information, compliments of, blah, 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 or they see that we're affiliated, so yeah, definitely. Let us know. Vicky's the one that's in charge of that, so.
If you guys wanna do any collaborations like that, just meet with me and I'll give you my card and follow up with you.
Okay.
And we're doing, that's what Thomas is here, because he's with Signature Real Estate, and we're doing a home buying seminar with him this Saturday. So we do those all the time. Yes.
Sure.
There you go. I'm Jenna. I was happy to see it.
Right.
Nice to meet you. So you're in this office?
Jasmine, nice to meet you.
You too.
Yes. You guys are upstairs.
Okay.
Do you have a card?
So,
That way I have your number.
yeah, that's something that we could do. So I.
Here, I'm out. Let me grab you one.
Properties that are located here, because I'm licensed here. So if you have real estate or other property located outside of the state, what we would do is just work with another attorney, to be able to get the deed recorded properly, and have it done where it's funded to your trust. So it doesn't matter that it's not located here, it all becomes part of your trust, so that when anything happens, it's just taken care of.
Well, we're starting to.
Yeah, that's cool.